Wisconsin I is interviewing candidates in the special election in the 42nd Assembly District. Spencer Zimmerman is one of 4 Republican candidates in the May 15 primary. The general election is June 12th. Spencer, welcome back to Wisconsin I.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you've had now, let's be clear, you'd have to move into the district if you were elected.
Yes.
Right, but you've been spending a lot of time in the 42nd.
Yes.
So what have you learned about the 42nd? What do you think its most important issues?
Sure. Well, actually, I had a lot of experience in the 42nd prior to running.
Okay.
I drove for an agricultural cooperative, so I drove all around the 42nd Assembly District. Previously, they operate out of Rio and Dane and a lot of the different smaller communities, so I drove seed and fertilizer out to different farms. So I do have a background having driven through the district there. And actually, I was born in Neenah, Wisconsin, but my family was from the Fond du Lac area, and part of the district's actually in Fond du Lac County.
I see.
And I first got introduced in politics back in 1986 when my uncle ran for sheriff of Fond du Lac County, and he ran in the 1990s as well. So I was introduced to politics going door to door in the Fond du Lac County area. So I've actually had some experience campaigning for my uncle when he ran for sheriff in Fond du Lac County those many years ago. So I do have a background from the 42nd Assembly District, from the Fond du Lac County area, and I've always wanted to serve my country. I served in the Air Force for 4 years. I was actually on duty during the 9/11 terrorist attacks. I was part of a security response force on 9/11, and I always wanted to serve. That's why I joined the Air Force, and that's why I'm running now. And after serving in the Air Force, I just felt like running for office would be a natural progression in continuing to serve the community. And that's why I'm running, and that's my ties to the 42nd Assembly District.
Then you have knowledge of the rural needs. What do you think are the best ways that the state government can help the rural residents of the 42nd District?
Maintaining the roads, obviously, is going to be one of my top priorities, and finding funding for the transportation budget is going to be difficult. I understand that there's different options. One would be raising the gas tax. I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to raising registration fees.
You're opposed to the $75 fee increase?
I am opposed to that. I also, I have a lot of experience driving for various companies. When I was in the Air Force, my job was computer system administrator, but it was for a mobile unit. So everyone in my squadron had to get their commercial driver's license, and I have a Class A, B, C, D, CDL, and I've been driving ever since. And over the years, I've seen how Wisconsin drivers have been paying into the Illinois tollway year after year for decades. And so Wisconsin citizens have been funding road repairs on Illinois roads for decades, and I think it's not fair. I think it's time for Illinois to start paying for Wisconsin roads. I'd like to see a series of tolls at the Wisconsin-Illinois border on vehicles entering Wisconsin with out-of-state plates. I proposed this idea a couple years ago, and there is some precedent for this. A couple other states, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, they have discounts for in-state drivers for vehicles registered in the state. They pay less for their tolls. I'd like to see a 100% discount for Wisconsin drivers and have a tollway just at the border for vehicles entering Wisconsin with out-of-state plates, and only at the Illinois border. I think that we could start to recoup some of the money that Wisconsin drivers have been paying for the Illinois roads. We could start having them contribute for our roads. So I think it's a good idea that at least should be considered, and that's, I think, where I would stand for transportation funding.
Okay. Another issue that is a big issue in the fall campaigns is going to be Foxconn. Now, we know more about the deal than the last time I interviewed you. Is that $2.85 billion in state incentives if they hit their construction and hiring targets? Is that something you support?
I do support Foxconn. I think that even before Foxconn, there was a couple other projects that I mentioned last time we talked. The Great Lakes Basin Railroad project would have been the largest privately funded railroad project in 100 years. It was an $8 billion privately funded project that would have bypassed the Chicago freight yards, and that would have sped moving products to market much quicker. They wouldn't have had to spend that time going through the Chicago freight yards. And I think that project should have had the right kind of support from people in the assembly. When it went up for a review at the Surface Transportation Board, I think that we should have had people supporting that project. It would have created estimates put as high as 200,000 jobs in the Midwest, this largest privately funded railroad project. I'd like to see that project be completed, and you know, it's really a huge investment for our energy infrastructure, and it's privately funded. So I don't know why we didn't have more support for that project in the Assembly. Another project would be the Enbridge Line 66 pipeline. Would have moved 800,000 barrels of oil a day.
Right.
If that does come up for review, I'm going to be a strong supporter of that project. I think that we need to work on our energy infrastructure. We need to continue to expand American energy independence, and try to make sure that we're no longer dependent at all on Middle Eastern oil. I think it's a national security issue, and it would move us so much further in that achieving energy independence. So I support that project. I also would have supported incentives for Kimberly-Clark to keep their jobs here.
To get the same type of incentives
as
the governor proposed for Kimberly-Clark?
Yeah, I think that we should have proposed, and we should try to keep jobs in Wisconsin whenever possible. I hate to see situations like the one that we had in Janesville with the GM plant closing. There was a Chrysler plant in Kenosha a number of years ago that closed. Yeah. I don't want to see any more closings of any more plants in Wisconsin. We should try to do whatever we can on a state level to try to keep those jobs here and prevent them from going overseas. So.
The issue of school safety, unfortunately, has come up with some of these tragedies. And when it does, the issue of gun laws comes up. And I know on your website you say you have the highest rated from the NRA. But in light of the tragedies, do we need to change any gun laws?
No, I don't see any necessary changes. You know, criminals are always going to find ways to get guns. And we need to make sure that law-abiding citizens have access to weapons so they can defend themselves. I think that you know, if we make things more restrictive, it's just going to hurt innocent people. It's going to make it more difficult for them to defend themselves. I've spoken to teachers who wish that they could carry so that they could protect themselves and protect their students if any kind of incident did occur. And you know, I believe in you know, law-abiding citizens being able to carry concealed, you know, anywhere. If we could prevent any kind of tragedy, I think that they should be given the tools to defend themselves, given the weapons to defend themselves. I think citizens should, you know, get. I mean, obviously, training is important. We don't want people, you know, unfamiliar with weapons, you know, and carrying them. But you know, with the proper training, I think any American citizen should be able to defend themselves. And right now, there's 300 million guns in America right now. These guns aren't going to disappear, and if we try to take them away, we try to reduce them, it's only the criminals are going to find ways to be armed no matter what. It's just going to hurt the citizens.
Do you think the biggest way to make schools safer is to offer training to teachers and counselors if they choose to carry a weapon?
Absolutely. I think they should. That should be an option. You know, we've seen ridiculous solutions like in Pennsylvania, where they wanted to give a box of rocks, or you know, or miniature Louisville sluggers to teachers to try to defend themselves. Those kind of solutions just don't make sense. I think that, you know, what's a rock going to do when you're up against a firearm? You know, we need teachers to be able to defend themselves. If they want to carry concealed in the classroom to try to stop a would-be shooter, I think they should have that right. I think anyone who's of age and able to own a firearm should be able to carry one.
One issue that's actually gotten hotter in the Capitol since the last time you and I talked when you ran for the 58th Assembly is the dark store controversy. And increasingly, retailers, restaurants, banks are arguing that their assessment should be tied to their closed or dark stores. Now, there were some bills in the Capitol to make changes, say the appraisals could not be based on a dark store. Do you think those bills should pass? Have you studied that issue?
Well, I haven't looked at those specific bills. You know, I would support legislation if it creates a level playing field based on sound property tax appraisals, ensuring that buildings aren't kept empty just to avoid taxation. So that's where I stand on the dark store controversy. I think we need to look at you know, the legislation that you mentioned. I'd have to look at it more closely before making a decision. But if we have a level playing field based on sound property tax appraisals, and we're making sure that we're not creating blight or having buildings kept empty to avoid taxation, that's the kind of solution that I think we need.
Let's talk about funding public schools. Do we put enough money into public schools, or do we need to put more money into public schools? And if so, how would you come up with that money?
Well, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty recently released its second annual report comparing school academic performance across Wisconsin, and I reviewed that report, and they're actually showing that private schools in the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program are outperforming Milwaukee public schools. So they're actually, private schools are with voucher programs are performing 4% better in math, 5% better in reading. And you know, this performance is being driven by Catholic schools, Lutheran private schools, and I believe in you know, those kind of programs. And if we can continue to improve, you know, the numbers, you know, independent charter schools rate better than public schools, as high as 12% better in reading, 15% better in math. Suburban schools are outperforming rural schools. So we need to look at these kind of studies and you know, make sure that we have school choice. You know, if parents want to send their kids to a private school, and if it's outperforming the public school system, you know, we need to make sure that they have that choice. So I believe that we should expand that voucher program.
Expand vouchers, which means change the income criteria so more families have the choice of using the voucher program.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have frozen, the state as a policy has frozen resident undergrad tuition on the UW system for 6 years. Should we freeze it for a 7th and an 8th?
Yeah, I'd like to see that continue to be frozen. We need to make sure that we keep tuition under control and try to limit any kind of increases as much as possible. It's already, you know, student debt is at unbelievable levels. We need to try to make sure that you know, when you go through college, you're not left saddled with huge amounts of debt. And you know, I would consider that definitely for you know, in-state tuition for students from Wisconsin. You know, maybe have out-of-state students pay a little bit more, you know, to try to increase, you know, to try to fund the schools. I would be
maybe raise out-of-state tuition.
Yeah, out-of-state tuition, non-resident tuition. You know, but we definitely need to keep it low or frozen for Wisconsin citizens. Wisconsin students.
Some legislators have suggested changing the law so if you could refinance your student debt. Do you support that, Spencer?
Yeah, I definitely consider, you know, looking into that more. You know, refinancing student debt, being able to get it at the lowest rates possible is something that we should definitely try to an option for students.
Some Democrats would like the state minimum wage increase even to $15, phase in an increase to 15. Do you have a position on the minimum wage?
I don't think the government should be interfering in private businesses in that way. I think that you know, it's fine where it's at right now.
You are the youngest candidate in the special election, the 42nd. What unique perspective do you have as the youngest candidate?
Well, I am the youngest candidate, but I have probably the most political experience as far as a candidate running for office, and that's the one thing that if you're looking at me as a candidate, you can find out where I stand on every single issue, basically, because I've completed so many candidate questionnaires over the last 10 years. I've ran in so many different races that you can probably find where I stand on almost any issue out there. And a lot of these other candidates, they're just blank slates. You don't really know where they stand on the issues. Besides, you know, if they answered questions here at the Wisconsin Eye interview, a lot of them don't have any other, you know, background. You can Google their name, but you're not going to find where they stand on the issues. You can find where I stand on all the issues. So I guess, you know, I may be the youngest candidate, But as far as political experience, I've been involved in more campaigns than any other candidate out there.
That's why I find you unique. This is your fourth run for the Assembly?
Yeah, it's actually my fifth run for the Assembly.
Okay.
It's my third special election, and
okay.
I first ran in 2008. I ran in the 46th Assembly District,
okay.
And this was a September primary. I unfortunately lost, but directly north of where I was running in the 46th, Keith Ripp was running for the first time for his assembly seat that
right.
I'm going to be running for now. And
yes.
At the time he was running in the 47th district. They redistricted and they moved the districts around a little bit. But I was running directly south of Keith Ripp when he was first running.
Okay.
And so we both were up for on the ballot for the first time. It was his first time. It was my first time back then in 2008.
So you explained how you've worked in the 42nd District, and your relative ran in Fond du Lac, and so you've explained your roots, but do residents of the 42nd District ask you, well, where actually do you live, and do you live in this district? Is it an issue with them?
When I explain, how long I've been doing this and how I've campaigned in the area, how my uncle ran for sheriff in Fond du Lac County back in 1986.
Okay.
They can understand. My family has roots in the Fond du Lac area, and part of the districts in Fond du Lac. I do have ties to the community.
I understand. If you win, though, you'd have to move from Janesville to the 42nd District.
Yes.
Okay. Then the final question is, do you want to highlight any differences with you and your three GOP opponents in the May 15th primary?
Well, the main difference that I would, again, say is you can find out where I stand on all the issues. If you're a voter out there in the 42nd Assembly District and you don't know where the other candidates stand, just Google my name. You can find out any issue out there. Basically, I've filled out a candidate questionnaire on almost any issue that could possibly be brought up, and you can find out that I've been previously gotten an A+ rating with the NRA. I've been endorsed previously by Pro-Life Wisconsin. So I have a record out there as far as having been a candidate before and previously having been endorsed by different organizations. I ran for county board at one point, and I was endorsed by the Dane County Deputy Sheriff's Association for county board previously. So I've had different endorsements over the years, and you can go to my website and find out anything you want about the campaign. These other candidates, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to find out where they stand on all these different issues because they haven't filled out candidate questionnaires. There's no history to them. There's a history with me. You can find out where I stand on the issues, and I would encourage everyone to get out there and vote for Spencer Zimmerman on May 15th.
Okay, thank you. Spencer Zimmerman is one of 4 Republican candidates in the special election in the 42nd Assembly District. The primary is May 15th. The general election is June 12th. Spencer, thanks for coming back to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you.
Thank you.